I'm Marshall Klarfeld. The presentation was the history of Planet X. And from the translations of Zecharia Sitchin, it was called Nibiru. And Nibiru is the home of an advanced space age civilization called the Anunnaki. So we're going to talk about Zechariah's cosmology translation. Let's start with this drawing that he put in the book, The 12th Planet. Here's the planet Nibiru. The story is it's called the Planet of the Crossing. This is Nibiru here. And it was captured by Neptune's net. They called it the net, but actually it's Neptune's gravitational field. Nibiru might have been a planet that was ejected from a star that was blown up. You know, that happens. When stars blow up, some of the planets get ejected and they're floating around in space free. And it happened to come near our solar system, Neptune being one of the biggest planets outside our solar, in the outside edge of our solar. Its gravitational pulled it in. Now it pulled it in clockwise. All of our planets circle, if you look down on it, counterclockwise. They go around this way. You see these arrows? Where's my cursor? Okay, these arrows are going counterclockwise. Nibiru, the 10th planet, or planet X, came in clockwise, and its first pass, when it got into the inner side, there was a fourth planet called Tiamat. Tiamat was the water planet, and it was in an orbit circling the fourth time out. And what happened was the moon, north wind, one of the moons, Nibiru had 4 moons, whacked this Tiamat, cut it in half, and sent it into a shorter orbit, the third orbit, because it had less mass. And it came in, and the debris from this collision became the asteroid belt. And then the comets also came out of here, and the comets went clockwise, way out past Pluto. So what we have here is a story that Zechariah translated. It was called Enuma Elish. It was on 7 cuneiform tablets. And he decided these names that were given to each of these were the planets. Some of them thought they were gods, names of gods and so forth. But no, Zechariah figured out this cosmology. And now that we have a planet that was split in half, it was a watery planet, Tiamat. And Tiamat had a moon called Kingu. And that moon came with Earth, so that our moon was Tiamat's moon. And I found out the other day an interesting thing about Kingu. It's circling our planet now, but it's leaving us slowly. They've discovered that the orbit of the moon is 1 inch a year. It's getting further away. Now, without the moon, our planet's in real trouble, because what the moon does is it keeps the water and the tides moving back and forth and kind of stabilizes the Earth on its orbit as it spins. It's a stabilizing device and very important to us. In a couple of 100 million years from now, if it goes bye-bye, the Earth's going to be in real trouble. But anyway, it's going to be around in our lifetime, so not to worry about that. Don't sweat the biggie. Okay, so what we have is the Epic of Creation, called Enuma Elish, as translated by Zecharia Sitchin, with this diagram, which comes from his book, The 12th Planet, showing Nibiru being captured by Neptune's net, they call it the net, which is gravity, coming in clockwise, making the first pass in the inner planets. It goes between Mars and Jupiter, and when it came between Mars and Jupiter, it whacked Tiamat, the watery planet, cut it in half, and then it went out into a 3,600-year orbit around the sun, comes back every 3,600 years, following the same path between Mars and Jupiter. Where, of course, now the asteroid belt is between Mars and Jupiter, all the debris from this collision. Well, what proof is there that Zechariah was right? And I took the planet Earth and I looked at it and I said, here's the Pacific Ocean. 33% of the Earth's surface is on this amount of water, and if you suck the water out of there, there's a hole. In fact, the deepest part of the hole is this Mariana Trench off of Japan. It's 7 miles deep. You could put Mount Everest at the bottom of the Mariana Trench and you still have a mile of water on top of it. So what happened was that the Tiamat lost 50%. Because it lost 50% of its mass, it assumed a new orbit, which is the third orbit, or from their perspective, was the seventh planet in. In other words, they came in from the outside. So I looked at some of the old maps of what people thought the continents looked like in the beginning. This is Pangaea over here. It was Earth was in all one mass. And now if that was true and the other half of our planet was gonzo, centripetal force is going to make that thing break up. The continental shelves are going to try to balance the Earth. The Earth is spinning, so in order to balance it, it's got to separate, as it did here, and this, South America fits into Africa very nicely here, and it gets to here. And what it's trying to do is balance a spinning object. And the continental plates, I believe, are an attempt over the millions of years of everything happens slowly, but the earthquake consequences of these things moving around are pretty severe. The Pacific Rim has all the earthquakes. That's where the hole is. And that's because they're trying to close the hole. This is my theory. You can think about it otherwise, but we were a planet that was damaged by collision. Now, I went to Caltech in 1947, and I was blessed to have as my physics professor Richard Feynman. He hadn't got his Nobel Prize yet. He was working in quantum mechanics and subatomic particles. And one day he said, well, I went to him at dinner when I invited him to dinner at our house. We didn't have fraternities, we had houses. And so I got him for a guest for dinner, and I said to him, Dr. Feynman, do you believe in UFOs? Because in 1947, Roswell happened. I entered Caltech in September of 47, so the buzzword around the campus was UFOs. And I figured, this guy's got to know. He's the smartest guy of my generation. He's the Einstein of my generation, Richard Feynman. So I said, Dr. Feynman, do you believe in UFOs? He said, Klarfeld, I believe in the law of probability. Of the billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy and the hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe, the law of probability tells me there are 10,000 solar systems just like ours, every respect. And we're the youngest, 4.7 billion years old. If any of the other civilizations survived their space age, they could have come to visit us. Now, it took me 60 years to figure out what surviving your space age meant. I understood the law of probability. I understood that he was working with subatomic particles, and they had to use probability to work with that number of pieces. So with suns in our Milky Way galaxy and all the galaxies in the universe, you have to have some way to figure out what's going on. It's too many numbers. But he said if they survived their space age, they could have visited us. No. In 60 years, I finally figured out what he meant. We're at the beginning of our space age. We have rockets and we have atomic weapons. So yes, we went to the moon in 1969. Yes, we're sending satellites out and we're doing all these exploratory things, but we have the potential because the proliferation of atomic weapons all over the world, there could come a day when some rogue nation gets a hold of one. We'll answer questions later. When a rogue nation gets a hold of one, it could be the end of us. So we've got to save our civilization. We've got to take care of our planet. And Feynman got me to thinking. I was 19-year-old undergraduate, 1950. I'll tell you how old I am. Anyway, I had another professor. I was a student of the Bible while I went to Caltech. Not too many Caltech undergraduates studied the Bible, but I was one. And I wanted to know about God, how God fit into this equation of science. So I said to Dr. Pauling, he's the only guy, by the way, only single recipient of 2 Nobel Prizes by himself. He's a unique guy, he's very bright. I said, Dr. Pauling, do you believe in God? 19-year-old junior asking his professor of chemistry a very heavy question. He said, Klarfeld, our discipline is to explain everything going on in the universe back to the beginning, which is the Big Bang. He says, if you were to ask me what there was a millisecond before the Big Bang, we don't know. You want to believe in God? Please do, because we don't have that answer. I said, wow, here's a bit of information that says there are unknowns. And if an advanced civilization like the Anunnaki, by the way, who had a deity, they called their deity the creator of all, they didn't know the answer to that question. Nobody knows what there was a millisecond before this universe came into being. Where did it come from? How did it happen? Did somebody create it? Are there laws? We know the physics and the laws in the universe are pretty straightforward. But the question is there a power? Is there a God? So Pauling gave me this great answer, and I share it with you because I think it solves a lot of the questions that we have. And now we'll go into the advanced civilization of the Anunnaki. How do we know about them? How do we know who they are, what they were, what they look like? Okay, this is a cuneiform tablet. See these little wedge marks? That's the writing that they wrote in. Now, so here's the alphabet that they figured out what these little wedge things meant so they could translate it. And here's the cylinder seal that I briefly showed you at the beginning. It's a piece of hematite. The best ones are made out of hematite. And it's a polished surface around the cylinder. Then somebody engraved in the negative images so that when you rolled the negative images over a piece of wet clay, you got these positive pictures of what they look like. Hey, here's a printing press from 6,000 years ago showing us pictures. The Bible doesn't do that. The Bible doesn't show. Now, the cuneiform writing of the Sumerian language was 6,000 years ago. This predates the Bible by thousands of years. So the information that's in the cuneiform tablets eventually finds its way into the Bible because the scholars of those days went to the king's libraries who had all the good cuneiform tablets, and they studied these stories that were coming out of the cuneiform tablets. And one of the stories was the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was on 12 tablets. And the 11th tablet tells the story of the Great Flood, a little different than in the Bible. Since you weren't at my workshop when we did Gilgamesh, then I'll tell you what the story was. It's really fascinating. Because of their brain power and their intelligence, they knew that the next time their planet came back into the inner planets, that Earth had heated up, it warmed, it climate change. And the Antarctic ice shelf had softened. And they knew the gravitational tug on Earth from the passage of Nibiru through the inner would slush this thing into the Atlantic Ocean, South Atlantic Ocean, causing a 1,000-foot high tsunami, which was going to cover the Earth and wipe out all surface life. Now, the Anunnaki knew this. There were two leaders in the Anunnaki hierarchy. One guy was the firstborn son of the king. His name was Enki, but he was born from a concubine, so he didn't have direct access through pure blood to the top job. The second-born son was named Enlil. Enlil was born from the mother, the queen, so he had the direct bloodline. As the story goes on, there's hundreds and thousands of stories in these cuneiform tablets, which I don't have time to tell you them all, but we can talk about them if you're interested. The story was that Enki wanted power. He wanted to be the king, but he couldn't be the king because his brother, his half-brother, Enlil, was in the way. Enlil was a hammering commander. He was made commander of Earth, and he gotten fed up with us humans. He said we're too noisy, and we're diluting their bloodline. He was very upset about the dilution of the bloodline. If you read Genesis 6:4, it says the Nephilim were upon the earth in those days. They were the sons of God, and they coveted the daughters of man, had intercourse, and produced the giants of old, the Nephilim, the men of renown. So this was dilution of the purebred Anunnaki bloodline, and Enlil didn't like this. So when he saw this flood thing happening, he says, great, wipe them all out, we'll start over again. That was what he said. And Enki said, you can't do that. He says, yes, I can, I'm the commander. And there's a hierarchy, there's a pantheon of the Sumerian gods. There's 12 of them. And he made them all swear that they wouldn't tell any humans, because a lot of them had relationships with humans. And so here is the situation, that this thing's going to wipe them out, and none of these Anunnaki leaders are able to save anybody except Enki, the firstborn, gets a dream. And the dream is a message from the creator of all that you need to save humanity. Your destiny, the Anunnaki's destiny, was to come to planet Earth, create humanity, educate them, and then let them, their destiny, humanity's destiny, was to inherit the planet Earth and take care of it. And so you can't let them go. And here's how you don't break the oath. I'll give you a little message. It says you go to your son's house and you talk to the wall. Now his son was Noah in the Bible. He had a lot of sons. He also had human female offspring and his son. So he talked to the wall and he had a diagram on a blue lapis lazuli. It's a piece of stone that showed how to build something. And he left it by the wall, and he said, wall, listen to me. Don't get up. Don't get out of bed. Just listen to what I say. Trouble's coming. I want you to follow the design of this ark. And when you see the rockets taking off, you know that we're leaving the planet. That's your signal to get your family on the ark. And I'll come and I'll give you a box, a golden box. And you take that and put it on the ark and leave. Now, there's a lot more to the story in the 11th tablet of the Gilgamesh, but these were the basic facts. That without breaking his oath, he didn't talk to his son, he talked to the wall of his son's house. And there are cylinder seals showing him talking to the wall and giving the message to his son. So that's how he overcame it. And what happens, of course, is that his son builds a submersible. The design was for a submersible ship with a snorkel. We have pictures of it, and I'll show it to you. And the hatch was watertight so that he and his family and his few animals got in there and they closed the hatch and they got this golden box. And in the golden box was the Anunnaki had collected, Enki had collected all the DNA of all the animals and all the species on the planet, the insects, everything there was, 2 by 2, is in this little golden box in DNA that can be regenerated after the flood to bring back everything that's being lost. So that went on this submersible. And a tsunami, a 1,000-foot high tsunami, if you got a ship on the surface, it's gone. It ain't going to survive. But if it's submersible, it'll tumble in the wave and survive. And we have a picture I'll show you of what the ark looked like. So the story, as people translated it in this 11th tablet, these are biblical scholars, and they're looking at this story, and they said, a lot of similarities here to Noah, what we have in our Bible. You know, maybe this is where the story comes from. But nobody told us about the secret oath. Nobody told us about the tsunami. And nobody told us about the submarine. So it's interesting. You want to read that book, we have it available at our table. Anyway, after this survival, in other words, the flood comes and they're survived, they land on Mount Ararat. The submarine lands on Mount Ararat. That part's true. And they come down from the mothership, Enlil and Enki and a couple of other leaders. And Enlil sees some humans down there, and he gets really ticked off. He said, who did this? How did they survive? And Enki now has, he points at his brother. He says, you did this. You broke your oath. No, not me. You know, and he tells him the story of the creator of all's message coming to him. And they were very obedient to their deity. And if the deity talked about destination, not destination, about, destiny, right, destination, you believed it and you didn't go away from it. And if he said the destiny of the Anunnaki was to come to Earth to create humanity, and humanity's destiny is to inherit the planet, we've got to save these people. We can't let them go. So bear in mind, after the flood, everything's covered with mud. 10 miles of mud all over the place. Nobody's going to live. There's no way to get food. There's no animals. There's no trees. So they helped. Enlil said, okay, you convinced me, to his brother, we'll save them. They brought down trees. They brought down animals, sheep, and they brought down wheat, domesticated wheat. Now, the scientists have found 9,000-year-old domesticated wheat on the top of Mount Ararat. So these are kind of some facts that maybe support the story that's in the cuneiform tablets. I look for other evidence to support it. And I went to this cylinder seal. I don't know how many people here know the story of Adamu, the first human. But the Bible says that God created Adam in his image. And if you remember Michelangelo, when he did the Sistine Chapel, painted Adam, and he painted God. And he's a student of the Bible. He said, well, if he created it, God had to look like us. So he painted God as a Homo sapien. And then the finger touch. Remember that? That part there? Okay, so what happened in reality, according to the cylinder seals and the cuneiform tablets, is that they took the female egg from the species that was there. It's a creature called Homo erectus. Homo erectus had been on planet Earth for 1,800,000 years, evolving, went all over the planet, covered every land surface, changed their look as they got into China and they got into Eskimo land. They all physically changed because their food chain changed and their atmospheric conditions changed and their whole lifestyle. Evolution is a very slow process. So over 1,800,000 years, we've got the 5 races. They're spread all over the place. But these are dumb creatures. Homo erectus had no vocal cords, couldn't talk. Had a third our brain size, and the most advanced in tool making. And get this species before us, the species right before Homo sapiens, 1,800,000 years, and they got to the level of spears and stone tools. Now, our species, Homo sapien, appears in Southeast Africa, just like the story in the cuneiform tablets, 200,000 years ago. They found the skeletal remains in Africa. And that species, in the short 200,000 years, us walked on the moon in 1969. That does not, all the tools that had to be developed in this species in order to do that does not happen in evolution. And the next bit of evidence is that if you look for skeletal remains from Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, there should be some in between. There are none. They've never found. That's why they call Adam the missing link. He's the link between these two, and there's no skeletal evolutionary pieces ever found of bones of any species in between, bump, Homo erectus, boom, Homo sapien. Now, we are Homo sapien sapiens, upgrade from the first Adamu. And the way they did it is they took the female egg from Homo erectus, scooped out the nucleus, put their DNA in it, and planted it in one of their female birth mothers. This is Nima, the sister of Enlil and Enki. And they produced the first Homo sapien called Adamu. Adamu was developed because the Anunnaki needed a primitive worker for their mining of their gold. They had a big gold mining operation. The reason they came to this planet in the first place, why would they come to Earth anyway? We had gold, they didn't. They were like a spaceship. Their planet goes way out past Pluto into the Oort belt. There's no sun heat out there, but they had an atmosphere. And just like a spaceship, if you punch a hole in the spaceship, you're in big doo-doo, big trouble. They had an atmosphere that they had destroyed like we have with an ozone leak. And their atmosphere was going out the ozone leak, and they tried everything they could think of to close this thing. The only thing they found that did it was gold flake. They took gold bars and flaked it and put the flakes up into the ozone level, and the sun reflected the light out and healed the ozone leak. But they didn't have any gold. So in order to save their civilization, they took a survey of the system they're in, and boom, Earth has the gold. Boom, we come to Earth, and that's our purpose. And for 200,000 years, their workers in their cities, the olden times, were mining gold in Southeast Africa, gold mines, down in the earth, just like we are today, sending it up to a city where they crunched it and smelted it and did all the things you have to do to get the gold out of the ore. And the flood came. Flood filled up the mines, destroyed that operation, okay? And before that happened, there was a story about the mutiny, that their miners didn't want to mine the gold anymore. It's hard work, it's hot and everything. So Enki said, we can create a primitive worker, the species around us. We put our mark on it, and they will be able to talk to them and so forth. And so through many experiments, as shown here, these crystal vases here, is what they were using to mix the egg and the DNA and planting it. It didn't work. So one day, this guy here, who had a earthen vase made out of earth, they put the mixture in the earth, in vase, and it worked. And that's where the story of we came from the dust of the earth. That's for the minute. Today, by the way, there are doctors who are using earthen vases when they do intravenous fertilization of females because it works better, and we don't know why it does that. But anyway, these guys discovered it a long time ago. And what is important here, by the way, this is the tree of life. They just threw that in so that you'd get a little extra, editorializing as they wrote things. It's kind of fun. They made the primitive worker, and the story is that they needed these workers to supplement their mining activities, and we had the first level of human type Homo sapiens. But then later on in time, Enki got interested in upgrading us, so he had direct intercourse with one of the beautiful human females and created Homo sapien sapien, which is an injection of more DNA directly from them. And the story of Ezekiel and in the Bible, the story they took out of the Bible about the traveling to God, this is all coming from the cuneiform tablet stories because he was very proud of what his new creation was, and he took, it's called Adapa. And Adapa, he taught him mathematics, he taught him physics, he taught him everything he knew, and he was the brightest human that had ever been created. And so they took him up, and there's a whole story about that, but I won't go into that right now. We're not talking about that. Okay. What do they look like? Here's a cylinder seal, a 6,500-year-old cylinder seal with the leader sitting here on this throne. Notice the high-heel shoes. In order to do that, is it up there? Hey, who? There we go. Thank you. Sorry. This slide shows the leader with a plow. This is after the flood. They're giving agriculture to the humans. This dude here is carrying a sheep. You can't see it, a sheep over his shoulders. And they got animal husbandry and the food. And up here in this, they threw in, now like you said, the tree of life, they just threw in the solar system. It's kind of an extra advent. And what it shows is all of our planets to size. This is Jupiter and Saturn, and this is Neptune and Uranus. And over here is their planet, and Earth and the Venus and Mars. So it was a schematic of our solar system 6,000 years ago where you couldn't see with your eyes only the four inner planets, the Earth planets. You couldn't see Uranus or Neptune on the outer side. So the question was, why did they do that? I called it stored information. It's irrefutable physical evidence of an advanced civilization being here 6,500 years ago, talking about things that we later are going to discover. Does that make sense to everybody? I mean, this is called technology transfer, and this is one of my favorite cylinder seals. Okay, let's move along. Many famous, iconic structures around the world, this is Machu Picchu, were built by these Anunnaki after the flood in order to separate gold from river water. They'd lost their deep mining operation, and they decided the best way to get it is to take placer water, which is stripping the gold out of the mountains. Like every spring runoff in Peru, this Urubamba River circles around Machu Picchu, and it's filled with placer gold. And all you have to do is take it up and pour it over these terraces, and gold's 19 times heavier than water. It'll bang out, it'll land on these terraces, and all you got to do is pick it up and collect it. It was really a slow process of separating gold, but it was not very labor intensive, and it happened every spring all over the world. The Mekong River, the Nile River are filled with gold particles called placer gold. And they developed techniques and they built structures, I believe. I call this my washboard gold mining theory because if you remember the 49ers, they had a sluice box, and in the sluice box was a washboard. And as the gold came through in the sludge, it would hit this bumps and drop in the slots. And that's what's happening here. And all I had to do is pick it up and collect it. So I said to myself, where else do we find these things? And then, of course, archaeologists and historians claim the Incas built this. The Incas inherited it. Most of our major structures are inherited from an advanced technology before us. For instance, here's a bridge of size. This bridge crosses a 300-foot high deep canyon, and it connects to this terraced gold mining operation. Southern Yemen is filled with gold. And they were mining gold there, but they had to get across this ravine. So they built an interesting bridge here. This bridge is made out of stones, hard stones that are sculpted so perfectly they fit together without mortar. And look at this embankment here. Has to be cut. This wall has to be cut, slopped out. And here's an example of how they did that. They had the technology of being able to cut hard stone. This is andesite in smooth, making a place where they could put the stones against the wall so that the arch would have a support. Of course, how they did this 300 feet in the air, I don't know. But they did it. And this bridge still stands. In other words, this precision stone-cut bridge with no mortar spans this 300-foot canyon, and it's still there today. The thing's 2,000 years old. Another example is a place called Ollantaytambo, Peru, where there's a bunch of terraces. And I've made these golden designs here. I put that in to show you where the water came down. It would bang, bang, bang into these terraces, and the gold would be collected here. I went to Sicily in Greece in 2012, and I saw the Greek amphitheater, the same thing, terraces with shelves in them and water banging into the edges here. They had tow guards on these terraces. And I said, this was originally a gold mining operation before it became an amphitheater. And the technology that led me to is that the stairways between these terraces had 12-inch steps. Anybody here been to Chichen Itza? Climbed the Great Pyramid? Okay, El Castillo. It has 12-inch steps. You can get up crawling, but when you want to come down, you sit on your butt and you bump your way down because you cannot walk down 12-inch steps. We're humans. We're not tall enough. The Anunnaki were 9 feet tall, and apparently this is the step size that they used. So when you find that, you can come and recognize that this was probably built then. And now the question came to me, they had all these gold terraces, how the hell did they pick it up? I couldn't for years. I wrote a book 2 years ago called The Anunnaki Were Here, in which I proposed this washboard gold mining theory. But I said, there's got to be some system. When the gold, they're not going to around and vacuum it up, this way. And I discovered something that fit the perfect sample. And I put it in my new book called The Mysteries of Alien Technology. And it's right down here. Anybody remember the Greek myth called Jason and the Golden Fleece? Raise your hand. Okay. The golden fleece was a sheepskin that was filled with gold. Now, how'd that happen? They put it in the water, and lanolin fibers collects the gold. The placer gold was collected on the sheepskin, and they're still doing that in Sochi, in the Caucasus, with a lot of gold still coming down into the Black Sea. And they have these little wooden planks, and they put a sheepskin on, they put it in the water, fills up with gold, they hang it up and dry it. Of course, the mission of Jason was to go get the golden fleece. I said, okay, if that was a way to collect gold, they'd need millions and millions of sheep, right? They had all these surfaces they built, and they had to have pelts, sheep pelts all over it. So where'd they get the millions of pelts? Here, by the way, is a close-up of Our Lady with the golden fleece, and it comes from the myth of Jason the Golden Fleece. And today we know, it's a historical fact, that sheepskin is used in water. So my new washboard gold mining theory implies that sheep pelts were the collection system, but millions of these pelts were required. Today, sheep herders use pens. They don't use dogs, and I mean, that's the old-fashioned way with a shepherd or a crook and a dog. They take and they put electrified fences around the outside of the pens. They're kind of square-shaped. They put the sheep in here, they separate them, and they take the lambs out. And the reason they electrify the outside of these pens is to keep predators out. Predators can eat the lambs and take them away. So, the hundreds of thousands of stone circles that Michael Tillinger talked about in Southeast Africa are sheepfolds. If you look to Google and you look up a sheepfold, it's a stone circle that has sheep inside of it. And these sheepfolds were built with masonry that was not enforced by any cement or mortar, just stones put together, and they appear all over the world. This is Africa, the great African Zimbabwe stone wall. And I also found them in Syria, in the Golan Heights. There's an exact replica of this Zimbabwe center operation and spiraled out to the interior. And I also found these in Peru. I found stone circles not only in Africa, like Michael has, but in Peru and also in the Golan Heights. And what I also discovered was, you see these stone walls here? Everybody see this? Look up here at the top. They put kind of a design. You see these little triangular pieces of stone that are in this wall here in Peru? You go over to Africa, Zimbabwe circular stone walls have these same designs. So I said to myself, hey, maybe it's the same architect that built these stone walls. And I said to myself, here's an alpaca. Alpacas are the sheep of Peru. They have skins that are just like pelts, and they operate in the same fashion. So my conclusion is that what Michael has discovered as the frequencies in these stone walls is a protection system for predators. These high-frequency sound waves are adverse to animals. The predators that want to come inside the circle are held out by the natural resonance of these stones. The reason they vibrate at these frequencies, we can't hear it. Our machines pick it up. But the predator animals who try to get in to get to the sheep are being held out, just like the electric fences. Does that make sense? Okay, that's my belief on the sheepfolds. And sheepfolds, hundreds of thousands, millions of them all over the world. And I think that in order to support my washboard gold mining theory that this sheepskin collection of gold is the final element that makes it make sense. Okay, now we get to other objects that were given credit to other people, but they were built with advanced technology. The Anunnaki were 1 million years more advanced than we are. So obelisk is a stone, like this one is in Karnak Temple. Sucker's 97 feet tall, weighs 320 tons, and it sits on an 8-foot square pedestal. Sat there for 2,000 years, didn't fall over. Who would want to build something like that? First of all, to get the quarry, you got a stone quarry, you got to dig out the shape of the obelisk. You got to cut underneath it to shape it. And then you got to lift it out, transport it across, and then tip it up. There's been a lot of experiments done that the ability to do that requires advanced technology, advanced machines, and who would want to build an obelisk anyway? You know, it's kind of a lot of work for something that just sits there. So I said to myself, let's find more evidence. You got the biggie there? Okay. This is the largest obelisk that never left the quarry. You can go there if you go to Egypt and look at it. This dude is 120 feet long. It weighs 1,200 tons and is still sitting in the quarry. Now, they've gone down there and look. They've removed the stone around it and they've cut underneath it so that they can get it out. And there's a little thin piece of granite that runs the full length of this guy, that's left in place there. And the next project is to cut that loose and lift this guy out. Well, do you know what 1,200 tons is? Anybody got any idea how much 1,200? I'll tell you. You take 3 747s and fill it with passengers, fuel, and baggage, and stack them on top of each other, and you try to lift that. We don't have today lifting devices that can lift 1,200 tons. So the question is, how did these people with simple tools, stone tools, bronze and copper chisels and hammers, perform the necessary cutting of the stone, getting under, and how the heck did they get them out of the road? I say no. The Egyptians got credit for the obelisks because they inherited them. There was an advanced technology there before them who built these things. And this is the physical evidence, folks, of the Anunnaki having been here. Because if the Egyptians didn't do it, who the hell did? You know, did the Egyptians build the pyramids? No. I don't think they had the capability of building these complex structures. So I went and looked for more evidence of the Anunnaki having been here, coming from the planet Nibiru in their pursuit of gold. And there's a place in Petra, Jordan. This is a fascinating sculpture. See this guy here? That's the size of a human. This is a rock wall that's been sculpted out with a room in here that's 50 feet tall, 30 feet wide, 50 feet long, nothing in it, just a plain wall, cut out of the rock. And this is hard rock. And this is called the treasury. And it sits at the end of this wadi, called the Wadi Musa, the Sig. And the floodwaters that drain placer gold from the Nubian minefields, every time it rains, the flash floods go through. People have died. This is the only way you can get to the treasure. You have to kind of walk down this thing. It's a natural formation between the cliffs. And as the water shoots out of here, bingo, it goes in here. Look at the watermark here. You see these watermarks? It goes into this room, and if there's sheepskin in there, guess what? We're collecting gold. Possibly. Huh? Well, yeah, right, okay. So why do they call it the treasury? You know, this is evidence, guys and gals, that I've collected in my books that, to me, proves an advanced technological civilization was here. Okay, whoops, let's go back to, here's the Greek amphitheater I told you about. We went in May of 2012. Here's the stairways. And the Greeks built wooden 7-inch steps in between these gallery rows. No, if you want to seat people in this amphitheater, you got to go up these aisles. Well, they're 12-inch steps, and you can't do it. So they put these wooden 7-inch steps over the center aisle. And if the architect, the Greek guy who designed this thing, wanted his people to go up, why would he put 12-inch steps? Doesn't make any sense to me. And also, this is heavily eroded stone. The water erosion is terrific here. And the acoustics in this 460-foot arena are fantastic. You can stand on the stage here and just whisper, and you can hear it all the way up into the top. And they were masters of many things. They were not only vastly superior stone architects, but they were great with acoustics. So they said, well, we'll leave this thing later on after we got our gold from the river, which was up here. The water came from the top up here, and it came cascading down over these terraces and was collected the same way the others were collected. By the way, each terrace has a lip, kind of like a toe guard. Now, why would you go to the trouble of removing all the stone to give people toe guards? Doesn't make any sense, but it would bump the gold into the toe guard. So this is some of the physical evidence that I brought to the table and put in my books to say that there were advanced technology. You go to India. Here's the big temple in India. It's a step pyramid made out of granite stones that are precisely cut and put together without mortar. And this little dude on the top here is called the cupola. This guy weighs 160,000 pounds, or 80 tons. And it sits on the top of the pyramid, which is 260 feet in the air. And local legend, guys, is that they built a 3.5-mile dirt ramp, and the elephants pulled this thing up. The elephants had this thing behind them, and they pulled it up somehow and got it on the top. I said, baloney. That's local lore, trying to figure out how to do it. How was 80 tons lifted 262 feet and placed on top of this particular pyramid? There are other pyramids in India that do the same thing. I say it was advanced technology. And by the way, to get into the inside of this temple, you have to go up 12-inch steps again. And here, you notice this iron grating here? The Indians built 7-inch steps over the 12-inch steps so that their people could get into the temple. So, we've got more evidence. Well, let's talk about the biggest evidence of all. To me, the most magnificent structure on our planet are the Great Pyramids at Giza. And they're put together with precision-cut stones and no mortar. And inside the Great Pyramid is one of the most magnificent designs that everybody and his brother try to figure out what it is. What's going on in the Grand Gallery? The Grand Gallery is inside the Great Pyramid. It goes up to a thing that people call the King's Chamber. And the gallery goes up at a steep angle, and it's got a cobalt ceiling. Stones, shown here. Notice the edges here? That's cobalt. So those, if you look at it, it's an upside-down pyramid, step pyramid. And if the water were to surge up and down this Grand Gallery, it would bump against these edges in the ceiling and drop gold. And there are 27 of these slots here inside the Grand Gallery, all the way up here and all the way down the other side. And my theory says that they put the sheepskin in there, water went up in there, and I'll show you how that worked, and was collected. They had a ramp built around the entrance of the Great Pyramid. And this ramp allowed water from the Nile River, which was filled with placer gold, come up to the entrance and come shooting down this perfectly cut, watertight channel to the pit where there's what's called a hydraulic pulse generator. And the hydraulic pulse generator, before there was electricity, is the way you raised water up. Comes down, hits the generator, bangs up, sends it higher than where it came in. This is how people pumped water before we had electricity. Okay, so here's what's going on. The water comes down here, it gets bumped by the pit pump, goes up into the Grand Gallery and surges back and forth and finally gets into what they call the King's Chamber. And remember the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber? Everybody heard about this? Guess what? If you examine it closely, there's damage all around the edges. Every edge on the outside has got bruised, and this corner got bruised all the way down to here. Archimedes said anything with a hole in it's going to float. So if water came into that chamber, this guy's up in the air bouncing around as the water surges up and down the Grand Gallery, and it's being damaged on its edges, which is the physical evidence right here of it. And one time it got damaged to the point where water got in it. Boom, it sunk. That was the end of that experiment. Now, what did that look like? Somebody else, not me, a guy named John Cadman, came up with this design. And what it was the hydraulic pulse generator down here, the water coming down here, banging in here, going up into the Grand Gallery, and being forced up and down with a pulsing action, which pushed the water up against the ceiling and into the King's Chamber where the box floated around and banged in there. And I didn't design this, I just discovered it. And it's like a puzzle. Everything to me is kind of a puzzle. And what I do is I put the pieces together and I come up with what I call a washboard gold mining theory. Now, the pyramid had many other uses after its first function, which I think its first function was that everything was built watertight. Had to be a reason to build the chambers watertight, the passages watertight, the Grand Gallery watertight. This is what I think that reason was. And so it's supportive evidence of advanced technology from an outer planet. Nibiru is a planet from outside of our solar system. It came in. This is the pyramid at Chichen Itza that I told you about. And it's a washboard gold mining operation. And the evidence of that is you see these little steps here, these stones, going up the side of the pyramid. Well, you could walk up here to the top on the stairway, which are 12-inch steps. But in order to get to the gold, which is over here on these terraces, you had to have some way to get up the terraces. So these little climbing stones had to have a function. And I'm saying the function was to get to the terraces to pick up the gold. Okay? In southern France, there's the most magnificent bridge going across the Gardon River. It's called the Pont de Gard, a bridge across the river. It's an aqueduct. It's always for hundreds and thousands of years, for 2,000 years, been called a Roman aqueduct because the Romans were the ones in charge there. I say they inherited this bridge from the Anunnaki. The reason I can say that is that the precision with which this bridge is built, whoops, the precision with which it's stones precisely cut, put together with no mortar. These arches, there's no mortar in it. The base, there's no mortar. They're anchored, and there's steel clamps holding the stones together inside, and these arches go up, and the water comes down this channel to get across the river. And guess what? This is 899-foot long bridge, and the differential between when the water comes in and where it goes out is 3/4 of an inch. Now, can you imagine the architect who drew this bridge and said, we put all these loose pieces together without any mortar, and you end up so that the water trickles down across the top, 899 feet. That's 1 in 18,000th of a differential. It's a marvelous. I'm a mechanical engineer. I apologize for that. But I look at things in reverse engineering perspective. And everything that I examine is how did they do that 2,000 years ago? Now, here's another thing. This river floods every spring. Magnificent flooding. And every bridge that was ever built across this bridge has been wiped out by the floods. Earthquakes have knocked the bridges down, and windstorms have blown them over. This bridge, Pont de Gard, stood there for 2,000 years. It's still there. It's one of the most attractive features in France. You go down to the southern part of France near Nimes, where it is, and you'll see it. And I said to myself, how could a bridge be earthquake-proof, stand there for 2,000 years when everything else crumbles? Most of the other Roman aqueducts that were built with bricks and cement, they've gone. They've crumbled. They've fallen down. This bridge has no mortar in it. It's still standing there. So I said to myself, it had to be advanced technology. And I looked at the place where the water went. The water went from the springs up here 31 miles across the bridge and down to a town called Nimes, France. And in Nimes, France, I found an arena that looked to me very much like the Roman Colosseum before the Roman Colosseum was built. And this guy is built with stones precisely cut with no mortar, fitted together perfectly in an oval shape with arches, two tiers high. And that stood there for 2,000 years. So I started to investigate the Roman Colosseum. I think the Romans inherited the Colosseum. And if we look closely at the Colosseum today, what do we see? We see 3 tiers of arched masonry with no cement, but they're clamps. See these holes? These are the holes where they strip the metal out of there. These are iron clamps holding. Now, anybody been to San Francisco? Earthquake city, right? Okay. We have what we call UMBs, unreinforced masonry buildings made out of brick. And the ordinance is you got to put steel framework in them or they're going to come down again. So every unreinforced masonry brick building in San Francisco is reinforced with steel girders, tying it all together so when the next shaker comes, the building won't fall down. Well, who the architect of the Colosseum was, took and put steel iron clamps in between the stones, the precision cut stones, that held them together so that they wouldn't shake down. It has earthquakes in Rome. And guess what? I discovered that the foundation of this Colosseum is a donut shape. It's 42 feet thick and it's 102 foot wide, and it's built on a lake. The Colosseum was built where there was a lake. They drained the water out of the lake. They had a swamp, and they floated this foundation, like here, on top of the lake. Somebody figured out that that's what you needed. They didn't go to Japan, which was earthquake country. They've built floating foundations today to survive their buildings, so that when the earthquake comes, the foundation is supported. Look at the shape of this Colosseum, and this wall has fallen down because they took all these clamps out. Once you take the iron out of the clamps, you no longer have the reinforcement, and the southern wall dropped off. But this still stands. The clamps are still in here. And I say to you that the architect who designed this building knew about earthquake survival, a technology that's very advanced. 2,000 years ago, I don't believe the Romans had that technology. I don't believe they knew how to build on a swamp a foundation, a floating foundation that would help the building survive. And as proof of that, I found another building in Rome, the Pantheon. Anybody been to the Pantheon? Okay. The most important, exciting feature in the Pantheon is the dome, right? And you go in this room, 142-foot span, unreinforced concrete dome. Michelangelo looked at it and said, the angels built this. Okay, every dome that's copied, every capital in the United States have a dome on there, and the inside looks like this, but it's got reinforced steel holding it together because the structural stresses of 142 foot, it's wider than this, unreinforced dome, circular shape, requires some magic. We don't know yet how this was done. I don't know. I have no clue. But I know that the Romans are given credit for it, and I'm saying there was an architect that was smarter than those guys. He conceived this design, which is the most copied design of domes in the world today, and it was built on a foundation of a donut. Down here, the foundation underneath the dome is 20 feet thick and 34 feet wide, and it floats on the base. And the walls that support the dome are hollow. See this hole here? This hole here? Somebody built hollow walls to lighten the load, and then put the dome on top of that, and left a hole in the center so the sun could shine through. And one of the trademarks of this advanced Anunnaki civilization to me has always been they mark the solstices. They mark winter, summer solstice, and the equinoxes when the sun shines. In Rome, this object was oriented so that all year long this circle shines around the dome, the reflective shadow, because of the angle of the sun. And at the equinox, bang, it hits the center floor. A remarkable feat of engineering, ladies and gentlemen, that I think an advanced technology did. Here's another structure. This is the last one. Boring you, I can tell with this stuff. Okay. Greeks' famous Parthenon. Up on the Acropolis. Anybody been there? Seen it? Okay. They took it apart 30 years ago and put it back together to try to get it to its original shape. What they found out was, A, there were no straight lines in it. The foundation curved in the front this way, or this curved. The roof curved. The sides curved, like a turtle, the foundation turtle, and the columns tilted in. But that isn't half of it. There are 70,000 parts to the Parthenon. Every one of them is different. They differ by the thickness of your head hair. So, you're the general contractor. You're telling your people how to put it together when the pieces come. Where's the blueprint? Where's the magic? I mean, these guys couldn't do it. They took a computer, and they took each piece and they measured it in all its dimensions, and they fed it into the computer to figure out how to put it together. The computer couldn't do it. We don't know to this day how it was built. But it stands there, and the reason for the curves, folks, is that parallax lines that come together make these two red lines, which are straight, look bowed. See how they look bowed? They're actually straight. So if it was built with straight lines, it would sag to your eye. Your eye would look at a saggy building. So they built it up with the proper amount of arch, so when you look at it, it looks straight. And this building looks straight. Now, this is the most famous design copied all over the world. Our Supreme Court in the United States has this design. And these columns are bowed. They're not straight. And the reason that the columns bow out and bow back is that your eyes make them look straight. And I'm saying that to have created this beautiful, beautiful structure with all of its curves and its multitudinous 70,000 unique pieces, required a technology that I don't think we have today. And I say to myself, who did this? Who were the geniuses? Who was the general contractor that put together these buildings in such this magnificent fashion? And I think it's the proof that I try to display in my books of this advanced civilization, which we call the Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, by the way. In the writings in the cuneiform tablets, this is the first civilization. Sumerians came out of the caves 9,000 years ago. Bang, they got all the first. They got the wheel, they got religion, they got language, they got physics, astronomy, astrology, mathematics. And they say everything they had was given to them by the Anunnaki. We know from evolution that people just don't come out of the caves and have a city with straight streets and buildings and so forth on it. So you have to believe that what they said was probably true. And in the story of Gilgamesh, they talk about coexisting side by side. That's what's interesting about Gilgamesh. It's the story of Anunnaki living side by side with humans 4,600 years ago. Okay, I'm going to throw this open for discussion. We have 4 books available for you to see. They're filled with pictures. I told Zecharia, I said, your stuff's great, it's hard to read. I was bluntly brutal with him. I said, you know, you're a scholar, you write great stuff, but people go to sleep or they try to read their way through your stuff. Can I make an 8.5 by 11 book with a lot of pictures like Life magazine and tell your story? He said, sure, Marshall. The only thing I want you to do is say, if you print any of my stuff, with permission by Zecharia Sitchin. So you'll see that over and over and over again in my books where I show a picture from his books. But I'm able to tell his story, this very complex story that he writes so beautifully in 15 books that he wrote, in my 8.5 by 11 Life magazine style books. So if you want to get to the bottom of Zecharia Sitchin, come to my table and you read these books. They're easy. The last book we did, this Ancient Mysteries of Alien Technology, there's 170 beautiful color pictures of all the things I've just shown you of these buildings. And a few words, I don't have to say very much because, as the Chinese said, pictures were 10,000 words. So I'm the substitute for Jason, who wanted to tell you the story of the 10th planet. I've given you a little background from Zecharia. I'd like to open it up now. It's a workshop. Let's play as a workshop. I'll try to answer any question you want about this material or anything about the history of us, our planet, and according to Zecharia. Yes?
Hi. I was wondering how you feel, how the washboard, the gold mining operation relates to Christopher Dunn's.
Okay, good question. How does my theory about the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, Chris Dunn said it's a power plant, that he checked it out in his vibrational thing. Everything the Anunnaki built had multiple uses. And after the washboard thing quit, they put crystals in these slots, and they put in the upper chamber where the thing had quit, the big gug. By the way, the dimensions of the gug fit exactly the Ark of the Covenant. It could have been that power source. And what Enlil wanted the pyramid to do was to light up at nighttime. They put white limestone facing like a tile roof over all of them. It's gone now, except one pyramid still has a few stones left at the top. And it reflected the sunlight. And it pinpointed the two snow-capped mountains at Mount Ararat in Turkey, so that they had mountains here covered with white reflective sun. It gave them a line to where the landing platform was. That's how they found their landing platform. But Enlil wanted it to light up at nighttime. So the capstone of the Great Pyramid was a mixture of gold and silver. And it sat on the top, and boom, when the energy was, these crystals pushed it into a lightning bolt. It's kind of like Tesla. Remember Tesla's stuff, where he had a huge condenser and he could make lightning bolts. So it had many functions, and I don't say that Chris is wrong. I'm saying that in the beginning, my clue was, why was it watertight? That's a lot of hard work to make every passage and every chamber in there watertight so it wouldn't leak. I think when they were done collecting, they had to get rid of the water to put the next load in. The Nile River, has the gold in. And the discharge water headed back to the Nile past the Sphinx. And the western wall of the Sphinx is eroded with water. And there's some theories out there that it was rain. I'm saying maybe it was rain, maybe it was the discharge of the water from the washboard gold mining operation that caused the erosion on the Sphinx. But anyway, the timing is the same. They think the pyramids and the Sphinx are over 10,000 years old. That's the newest guess on it. And guess what? There were no Egyptians 10,000 years ago, right? So who built it? The Egyptian civilization started 5,000 years ago. So we have this gap in time. They might be older than that, but somebody built them. And magnificently together in a fashion that has boggled the mind of everybody that's looked at it. Any other questions?
Your 4 books, did they capture, condensed all the information of Zechariah's?
Yes, I tried to. In other words, I had a 10-year relationship. He was my teacher. I discovered him in 1999, got on the phone with him, and I said, you've answered. For 60 years, I was looking for the answer where we came from. I couldn't put it together. I couldn't get I read his first book, The 12th Planet, and it made sense to me, so I made contact with him, and we became a student and teacher relationship. And I said we should make a movie. And our goal was to take the story of Gilgamesh and make it into a screenplay so that Hollywood would pick it up. Now, the book number 2, Gilgamesh 10, is written in a screenplay format, ready to go.
So that's the whole Gilgamesh story in Gilgamesh
Yeah.
10, is it?
I took the storyline. I said, this is the action from Zechariah's translation. This is what happened to the king. He was our first action hero, by the way. This guy was a strong, macho man, and he fought lions with his bare hands. He could kill a full-grown lion with his bare hands.
That's the layman's version with it all there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Now, in China right now, they're reproducing Hollywood. They want to do all the films in China that they do in Hollywood cheaper. They got the money, and they got our money. They're building, I have a friend who lives there 6 months out of the year in Shanghai, and he's in the movie business, and he's raising money, and their scheme is they want to make a trilogy, like Star Wars. Gilgamesh 10 be the first one. The second one would be Enki, Prince of Nibiru, and the third one would be an anti-war movie called The Great Calamity, because they caused a lot of trouble while they were here. Anyway. If that all comes to be, I've got my life pathed out for the next 4 or 5 years, which if I make it.
30 years left.
Pardon?
Next 20 or 30 years, you'll be right.
I don't know. I'm closer to the end than the beginning. Trust me.
The way you're going, you'll still be here.
Well, the body, we don't die of old age, folks. We die of disease. And if we can cure diseases, we'll live to 900 years like Methuselah and Noah. But we've got to learn to get our immune system up strong like they did. I think that's how the Anunnaki lived as long as they did. They cured their diseases from their body, and they aged very slowly. And one of the interesting things I asked Zechariah, I said, they were here for 200,000 years mining our gold. What were they doing with all the gold? Didn't take that much gold to close the ozone leak in their planet, my God. And then they had another 200,000 years after we were created to mine our gold. Where did all the gold come from?
My husband.
What?
I just want to tell you folks, the rear is starting, we've run over time here, but if any of you that are planning to go to the big event tonight, the contract event out there, it's already about 8:20.
I thought we started at 9:30.
Is it 9:30?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It originally was.
This is Mary, my wife, co-author of Gilgamesh 10.
You might need time to,
takes you back 4,600 years, and you're alive in the city of Uruk with these characters, with Gilgamesh, the Anunnaki, Princess Ishtar. And I said, this is the story. You tell me what they said to each other. And out of her imaginative brain, she wrote this screenplay of what they said to each other and how they acted and interacted. It's an exciting story. I'd encourage you to read the screenplay because it tells a lot of facts to think about. Yes, sir.
Oh, you were talking about the gold. You just talked about what they did with all the gold.
Okay, yeah. So I asked Zecharia, I said, teacher, I think they were making the gold into atomic powder, white powder gold, and they were ingesting it so that they would live longer. They were told when they came to planet Earth that they would age faster than they would have on Nibiru. In order to slow down the aging, they invented white powder.
Monatomic gold along the lines of Lawrence Gardner.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And what did Zecharia said? Marshall, the record speaks for itself. He wouldn't go outside the box. I look outside the box.
They found evidence of that already. They found evidence of that already.
Yeah, they had.
And that has to do with can you guys stop? Excuse me. They found they found evidence, or the reason they did it was to stop, to keep the telomeres, the end of your DNA, your telomeres from.
Good, okay. Well, they were so advanced, they could tinker around with their DNA, and I think I've got a friend, a very good friend, who takes this white powder gold, and he says, it's going to make me live longer, and I said, fine, do your thing. I'm not into that. And I said to Zecharia, I said, you know, the victors always write the story. They tell us the facts. Do you think the Anunnaki were spinning us in any direction in the story they gave us? What do you mean, Marshall? I said, well, this mutiny story about the miners mutinying, and the only way they could get the production of gold back was to create this primitive slave worker. Oh, yeah, that's the story. I said, well, maybe they're spinning us. Maybe they wanted slaves and they didn't go against the prime directive, so they made up this story about the mutiny. He would not budge, folks. Zecharia was a conservative, beautiful, beautiful scholar, and I was kind of a pinprick in his side, coming up with these crazy notions, but that's the way my mind works. I always want to know more, and I see the world in a different way than he did. He was 5 years older than I was. Anyway, yeah.
Is Planet X in our solar system? That
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It's by Neptune.
So why don't we ever see it?
Okay. It comes around every 3,600 years. We have a record in my first book, Out of the Missing Link. I produced the number of civilizations, names of the civilizations, what they called it. They witnessed it. They experienced it. Starting with the Sumerians, they called it the planet of the crossing. The Hebrews called it the golden globe. The Egyptians called it the Indians called it, the Hindus called it Yuga Tuba. The Egyptians saw it. They had it, and the Greeks had a name for it. They called it Nemesis. Now, why would you call something Nemesis? Because it causes all kinds of problems. When it comes in through, and they experienced it, there's earthquakes, there's tidal action, there's all kinds of gravitational perpetrations that come from, it passes between Jupiter and Mars.
So it's already in our solar system, you're saying?
Yeah, it's in there. It got
Which
captured.
universe is it now then?
Well, let's take a look at this
Is
thing.
it your contention that it's a singular celestial body versus like another brown dwarf binary component to the solar system that has?
It
of
is.
which Nibiru is one of several planets?
Hold on. One question at a time. Let's go. Whoops, go back. Here we go. Okay. This is Zechariah's sketches of the translation of Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation that were written by the Sumerians, or in cuneiform Sumerian language. We don't know who wrote them, that tell the story of the creation of our solar system. And this intruder planet, Nibiru, or Planet X, came into our solar system in a clockwise fashion. All of our planets circle the sun counterclockwise, but Nibiru came in clockwise, and one of its moons whacked Earth, cut it in half, and then it went back out into its 3,600-year loop before it comes back in again. It split a fourth planet, which is a Tiamat, the watery planet, in half. Because we lost our mass, the asteroid belt was created by the debris, and the comets, which, by the way, orbit clockwise around the sun, slid into the third orbit. Now, as I said earlier, they didn't talk about the third planet.
The asteroid belt goes clockwise?
Yeah. No, just wait. I mean, now, it hasn't been, except maybe 10 years now, that the astrophysicists and the astronomers have agreed that there was a collision. For years, they denied us. Zecharia, in 1974, published the 12th planet with these pictures. Everybody poo-pooed him. He said, it's nonsense. All he was doing was reporting what was in the story. He didn't make it up. He told me, he said, Marshall, I'm a reporter. I'm just translating what's there, and I'm telling you what I figured out, the cosmology of it. It was brilliant. Guy deserves a Nobel Prize, what he's discovered. Now, the scientific community says, yeah, there was a collision. And I showed this picture of what the Earth looks like. You probably weren't here. Pacific Ocean represents 33% of the planet's mass. If you sucked all the water out of the Pacific Ocean, you got a hole in our planet. We got a planet with a hole in it. The Mariana Trench here in the Pacific is 7 miles deep. You could put Mount Everest down there and still have a mile of water above the top of it. So, where did this part of the Earth go? When you suck the water off of it and you're looking at this thing, it's crazy. It's not circular like all the other planets. All the planets are circular. They're global. Why do we have a hole in our planet? Zecharia says they're telling us this is what happened. I don't know if that's the truth. All I'm reporting to you is what he said. And in my books, I portray this stuff so you can understand it. They're easy to read, and they tell the story. And I really appreciate you being here. If you want to go someplace else. Okay. You have another question?
Is it just one planet, or does it have other?
It had 4 moons.
It's for Nibiru.
Nibiru.
It's a star.
Well, some people think it's a brown dwarf. The Sumerians said that it was a planet. They drew a picture of it. They gave us a cylinder seal with a picture of it as a planet. One of the planets, like our 9 other planets, Pluto's now back in as a planet. They took it out and they brought it back in. That's good. I like that. Anyway, this planet will come back in 1,600 years. Zecharia and I did a mathematical cut. I said, you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think. He said 1,500 years. I said 1,600 years because I went and took the time the last time it was seen. Now, the Romans are the only civilization that never reported. Like the Greeks were the ones before. They called it Nemesis. About 2,000 years ago, there was a Star of Bethlehem. Everybody thought it had another meaning. If it was Nibiru, that's a marker, a time marker, 2,000 years ago, and you add 3,600 to it, and you get 16 coming in. It's way out there. But that does not mean the Anunnaki couldn't come back whenever they want to. This is what I want to explain to you. The mothership was here, which supported them and their lifestyle on planet Earth while they colonized it all these years. Huge ship. It's in our story. Took off. They took off. When they faced off Earth, they took on their mothership, and they might be hanging out around Mercury. They're self-sufficient. And if they're at Mercury, they can come back anytime they want. Now, here's a positive thought for you to go away with. If Enki saved us once from the flood, it's the story of the cuneiform tablets of Gilgamesh, the 11th tablet says that he saved us. And we're about to destroy ourselves. They have a vested interest in us saving us because we're their offspring. So there have been stories of them flying saucers going over our silos and neutralizing the atomic weapon, just taking it out of action. They want to come back anytime. They could neutralize all the atomic weapons on the planet and save us, let us start over again. Because they do, I think, if Enki's in charge, have a vested interest in us. We are the future of them. We don't know who created them. There's no knowledge of where the Anunnaki came from. There's no knowledge where the universe came from. Nobody knows who created the universe. I want to be immortal. So the storyline is this headstrong king who's a misfit in his own right, wants immortality, but the storyline has to get him out of town in order to see if he and his adventures could do that. Okay, now the antagonist in the story is this gal called Ishtar. In Sumerian, her name was Ayana, but the Babylonians called her Ishtar. She had many names, but Ishtar, I think, is a name that describes an overprivileged Anunnaki princess who could fly around. She had her own machinery, helicopters, and used her sexuality to get whatever she wanted. And man, I want to tell you something. You might have read a lot of soap operas, but you haven't read anything about the sex life of the Anunnaki. They were oversexed. Come, bear no sins. They're oversexed. Okay, she, by the way, they found a statue of her, a life-size statue, in this uniform with a helmet with, you see these two things up here? These are symbols of horns. All the Anunnaki depictions we have show them with helmets with number of horns to determine the rank that they were. Now, she was a number 15. If you look on your chart that I turned out, she's down there towards the bottom. Her number was 15. So you had one set of horns. But what was interesting about this helmet was the back side of it. If you notice here, there's a box. And there's a pipe that runs down the back of her garment. Now, here's a statue. They dug it out of the ground. Somebody must have seen her and sculpted this statue. And on her shoulders, we have two enormous pads. Her ears have like listening phones, like a pilot would have. And they called this helmet Shugara. In the Sumerian, Shugara means goes far in the universe. Kind of tells you that she flew around. Well, we called her the Flying Princess. She was a member of the Pantheon. On your sheet, you'll see there are 12 individuals whose boxes are dark black. The dark black are the 12 leaders of the Anunnaki Pantheon in Sumeria. She was one of them. And this is, by the way, this is Zecharia Sitchin right here. On an exhibition, he took people to these various places when he was still alive, and he took this picture of her and he printed it in his book, and I got permission to reproduce it from him. I had a 10-year relationship with Zecharia. He was kind of like my teacher, and I respect very much what he did and what he contributed to us, and that's why I like to share with you what's going on in this book. Now, there's another character. It's called the Bull of Heaven. The translation says the Bull of Heaven, when it snorted, it dug 200-foot trenches in the earth. So it was kind of like a power beam weapon. I think it was a weapon and also a construction tool. So we put the character, the Bull of Heaven, in the Sumerian. They didn't know what lasers were, so they depicted it as a bull with wings. And it would snort out here. But I more or less, from Star Wars, like to think of power beams as a tool of destruction and a tool of construction. It's used both ways. And very interesting, in the story, there's a huge scene where Ishtar gets a little ticked off at Gilgamesh, and she wants to punish him, and she goes to talk to the head guy, whose name is Anu. You look on the top of your chart. Anu's the number 60. He's the king of the Anunnaki. And the interrelationship between Ishtar and the king, very interesting. Okay. Excuse me. Ishtar flew in what was called a whirlwind. A whirlwind, I think, is a helicopter. In other words, my translation, they didn't have words. What they saw, they described as a whirlwind. And a whirlwind, to me, was a helicopter. We happen to have this depiction from a 3,000-year-old carving on the temple walls at Karnak and Abydos. It shows a helicopter, and it shows what looks like a shuttlecraft here. So, if these indeed were tools that an advanced civilization like the Anunnaki had, she could have transported herself around in a helicopter and also in a ship. In the story, she travels from Earth up to heaven. Well, heaven is the mothership. We'll talk about that in a minute. The third major character in the book is Enkidu. Enkidu is what the solution the Anunnaki came up with to get him out of town. Enki, who was a very clever chief scientist for them, said, we can create a duplicate of the king who's as strong as he is and looks like him, and we will have him programmed to take the king out of town. So this was the solution that the Anunnaki came up with. They created out of a Homo erectus, hairy creature, gave him the face of the king. And you can see here in this cylinder seal, there's the king and there's Enkidu. And they have the same face, and they are holding a DNA-like staff between them. It's a double helix coil. You see that? So they're telling us that the cloning process that they did wasn't that they created a duplicate of the king. They kind of modified another species and made him look like the king and programmed him to be as intelligent and as strong as the king, and therefore it was a diversion. The solution of the Anunnaki, which is explained in the story. All this will come clear to you when you read your books, because that's the way it's portrayed. Now, I think in the movie, it would be interesting to have the same character play both parts. It's been done. There's trick photography, and you could have a very strong guy play both the parts of the king and of, here come two more people who come into the wrong door. Send them around. They don't read the sign. They're going the wrong way. This way. Could somebody go to the door and tell them? Please? They're just standing there like they don't know what to do. Oh, they're going to go in that door. Okay, the back door. I apologize for these interruptions, but this is a remote location, and there are a lot of people who signed up for this workshop and paid their dues, and I'd like to have them hear as much of this story as we can, even though if they come in the back door. I don't know if they have tickets or not. Okay, so we have Gilgamesh the king, we have Ishtar the protagonist, we have Enkidu, the twin of the king, and next slide, please. We have the character Enki. Now, as we see it in this trilogy of these three movies, the background characters will be the Anunnaki leadership. They will appear in all three films, the first film being Gilgamesh 10. So we have to understand who they are and what they meant. In the Sumerian translations, Enki had a rank of 40. Now, if you look at his helmet, you see he's got 4 horns on it. That indicated his rank, and it was just below his brother, Enlil, who was a 50, and Anu, who was a 60. The number system was based on 60. But Enki was known as the water god. You see these fish running up and down his shoulders. That's how they depicted him, as the water god. And he had this bird on his hand. It's an ibis, which is a water fowl. And he had great powers. He was the genetic engineer for the Anunnaki. He's the one that did the cloning. He's the one that was involved in the Adam experiment. I don't know if any of you were at our lecture this morning, but we explained how Adam was created by a cloning process. So Enki appears in this story, and he's the guy that came up with the plan. I can make this character, Enkidu. He named him after himself, Enkidu, right? So, and we'll get the king. We'll solve the problem. We'll get him out of town. Okay, here's what I've given to you all. I hope you all have a copy of it. And as you can see here, this is Enki. He's a number 40. His brother Enlil is a 50. And down here is Ishtar at a 15. And by the way, she had a twin brother whose name was Samash. And Samash was a 20. For some reason, the men got a little bit, the way it is, ladies, they got a number higher than you were. But very interesting, on the pantheon, if you look at this carefully, you'll see that Anu and his wife are members of the 12. Enki and his wife are members of the 12. Enlil and his wife are members. And the sister, Enki and Enlil had a sister, Nima. She's on the council. So that of the 12 rulers of the society of the extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki rulers, you had 6 women and 6 men, which I think is a pretty interesting study in not equality, but involvement. Now, where does the story take place? If you look at this map, you'll see the town of Uruk, which is a real city. In other words, they've dug it up. It's 6,000 years old. It was in the rubble and the sand. They dug it up, and it's right where it shows on this map. And they left town together. In the story, Enki and Gilgamesh leave Uruk, and they travel across the peninsula here to the Lebanese mountains. And in the adventures, this is like, envision Gilgamesh as the first action hero. I mean, here's a guy who's strong, he's difficult, he causes problems, he gets the story moving because he's an adventurer. And then he and this Enkidu, who's the reason that he leaves town, you'll see that in the story, go off together, traveling from Uruk to the mountains of Lebanon, where they encounter some very interesting things. First, let's look at the city of Uruk. Uruk was a walled city. One of the jobs King Gilgamesh had was to build this wall around Uruk. That was his task, to keep out the enemies. But the interesting thing about this city, was probably the world's first true city, is it was laid out in streets, straight streets with palaces and houses and what they called ziggurats, which is the first pyramid-type structure. And you have to wonder, this is where Ishtar had her temple, and they actually have found the remains of the gate to her temple. Here's a reproduction of the Ishtar gate at Uruk, done by King Nebuchadnezzar in 357 BC. And you see it over here as part of the city. This is the gate to her temple. And she was the head leader of the Sumerian city of Uruk, and the one that Gilgamesh had to report to. This is what a lot of problems came from. This guy really didn't like her. She didn't like him. And you have this antagonistic, which is part of the story, how they got along and what their fascination. It's kind of interesting. But showing this city as a very modern city, you wonder how the Sumerians did that. Well, they got the technology, according to the cuneiform tablets, from the Anunnaki, so they built a rather sophisticated place. Now, when they traveled to Lebanon, which is across the peninsula, it was a high mountainous region. Today it's still the high mountain, and there were what was called the cedar forest. And the cedar forest is these very tall trees. And in these tall trees was the Anunnaki's prized possession, which was their landing platform, where they came down, and they concealed it in the forest, in the trees, because they didn't want the people. In fact, they guarded it with a character, a mechanical monster called Humbaba. And Humbaba is the first challenge that Enkidu and Gilgamesh go, we're going to go kill Humbaba, kill the Anunnaki's guy. And this is kind of an exciting adventure because this is unknown, this is a ferocious defender of the wooden trees. They didn't want them cutting down the trees. So in our story, we have a fight scene, which is a really great scene, I think, between Enkidu and Gilgamesh taking care of the guard. Then they got further into the forest, and they see rockets. Gilgamesh sees rockets taking off from this platform. So what are we being told? We're being told that at the time of the people, the king of Uruk is going into the forest, and he's seeing rocket ships being launched. Well, where did it get launched from? Here's the landing platform. It's still there today. It's in Lebanon. It's a place called Baalbek. Anybody heard of Baalbek? Okay, this is a 5 million square foot platform, which the base of it was where the rockets took off. And on the northwest corner, you see these red lines? Those are 3 of the largest stones ever quarried on this planet. There's a picture on the right here. Here's a guy sitting here. These are called the triathlon. These stones are 64 feet long, 14 feet wide, 10 foot high. They weigh 1,200 tons. They were quarried a half a mile down the road, dragged from the quarry up to this platform, lifted up in the air from the ground. There was a course of stones below it, and placed up here 36 feet in the air. Well, who could have done that? I mean, it exists today. We go to Baalbek, Lebanon, everybody looks at, the Romans must have moved those stones up and down like that. Well, don't believe that. We couldn't do it. Romans couldn't do it. So it must have been some super advanced technology that created this landing platform. And in the story of Gilgamesh, we have them talking about rockets taking off. So Gilgamesh decides he wants to be immortal. This is the turning point in the story. And his mother says to him, he says, the only way you're going to get immortality is you got to go up to talk to Anu, and you got to get a Shem. Shem is a rocket. Go up. And where do I get the Shem, Mom? He says, at the landing platform. You're not supposed to go there. So here we have the story of, he's going, he's breaking all the rules. And when he gets to the landing platform, it's guarded by 2 robotic slaves that have laser eyes that kill everything that tries to get close to it. We have seen where that happens. And he very cleverly gets by these guard robots and gets into the door. Goes in the door down here, and he goes up, and he's looking for Shamash, because Shamash is the lord of the landing platform. This is Ishtar's brother. He's also known as the sun god in history. And Shamash is supposed to give him his transportation up to that. And he says, no way. He says, I can't do that. You're not allowed. It's against the rules. And Gilgamesh pleads with him. He says, please, the only way I'm going to get my immortality is I got to talk to the boss, and the boss can do me. Well, that doesn't happen. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. But as a consolation, Shamash says to Gilgamesh, there is somebody who could maybe help you. And this is where the story really gets interesting, because he sends him to the far away to visit his great uncle, who was a guy named Zecharia. And Zecharia is in the Bible, Noah. This is the 900-year-old Noah in the Bible. Now, you have the Bible story of what the Great Flood was about. But what you're going to find in your books, Gilgamesh 10, is the true story, according to the cuneiform tablets. So what they knew about the flood, they knew when it was going to come, and one god, Enlil, said, let them all die, because they're too noisy and they're diluting our bloodline. He was very concerned about his bloodline. And the story of how we were saved with the ark and with the saving of humanity, because the flood wiped everything out. The only thing that saved them were those folks, and there weren't all those animals. There was a movie just came out called Noah. I don't know how many saw Noah. Okay, that's a bunch of made-up Hollywood stuff. However, you will discover in your books, Gilgamesh 10, how life was preserved. It really happened. It wasn't all the animals. I'll reveal the secret of how they did it, but it's in the story. And it's like the scholars who wrote the Bible were reading the cuneiform tablets. There were libraries of cuneiform tablets, and the kings had all this information. And they couldn't understand what was going on because they weren't technically as astute as we are. So they made up stories from the cuneiform tablet to cover the scene that they read about. And you'll see, when you read your story, you'll see what the real truth was about actually what I think happened. And we have the mothership. This is a depiction of the Anunnaki mothership. We know when we go someplace to civilize a planet, well, like when we went to the moon, we had a ship that went around the moon and sent a transporter down, the Eagle. Eagle landed from the mothership, which orbited the moon before they got off the moon, came back to the mothership. So the concept of mothership has been around for a long time. We have a space station today that orbits the Earth 200 miles above us. It's been built and made to accommodate 10 to 12 people now. But one day, we will emulate the Anunnaki, I believe, and we will create this huge, monstrous mothership, which was the supply station for the Anunnaki on the planet Earth. You realize that at the end of the flood, which was maybe 11,000 years ago, the Earth was covered with this 10 miles of mud. There was no way those that did survive the flood would have survived without help. They couldn't farm, they had no animals, they had no trees, there was no way to live. The Anunnaki took from the mothership trees, animals, and wheat, domesticated wheat, brought it down and helped those survivors to start civilization all over again. And that's the only way it could have happened, folks. In other words, the fish in the sea survived the scene, but the Earth was covered by a 1,000-foot tsunami, which you read in the story of how that happened, covered the Earth with mud. And those that did survive had to have help. And the help came from the mothership. And in our story, the opening scene takes place in the mothership, so you get a little flavor of that. Okay, so the cast of characters and the locations of Gilgamesh 10 are supported by actual facts. For instance, there was a great flood. We know that. The Ishtar statue validates that there was an Anunnaki flying princess. The Sumerian kings list records that there was a king Gilgamesh. These are all true facts. There's a landing platform at Baalbek, Lebanon. We know that. It's, Hezbollah is using it as a defense base right now. And we found the remains of Ishtar's temple. Nebuchadnezzar recreated the gates of Ishtar's temple. So there were these facts that sort of support this interesting story. Now, ancient cylinder seals and carvings display Enkidu and the Anunnaki leaders. Now, we have beautiful cylinder seals, which were small hematite stones. Hematite is as hard as steel. They were about an inch tall, and they were polished in a cylinder, then carved in the negative around the outside were these pictures. And when you rolled it on clay, you got this image, positive image of what they look like. We've never before had pictures of what ancient people look like, but they are on the cylinder seals, so there's proof. And the temple beam carving depicts the whirlwind, the shuttle, the ark, and the whirlwind. Slide, please. Okay. Here's the submarine over here. This is what the ark was. The story you'll see that a ship floating on top of the water would never survive a 1,000-foot tsunami. It had to be some submersible that would tumble. And if you notice, the depiction of this submarine has a snorkel on the top of it. That's how they breathe. So there's a validity to the story of how the Noah story really happened. Of course, the folks that wrote the Bible just dealt with what they had, and they made the ark float on top with the animals in it. But you'll see this carved, these 4 carved images of both the Karnak temple and the Abydos temple. Okay. One thing that we know from the cuneiform tablets is that the people of Sumeria, the city of Uruk, described the Anunnaki as flesh and blood beings. They weren't gods. In fact, they addressed them as Lord and Princess. In other words, they hadn't elevated themselves to the level of being gods. 4,600 years ago, there were people living together with the Anunnaki. In fact, we lost a few folks. Sorry about that. Remember I described the fight of Enkidu and Gilgamesh conquering the monster Humbaba. Now, this is a depiction, a cylinder seal depiction of what they thought Humbaba looked like. We thought Humbaba looked a lot stronger and more powerful. But here's the story. They took from the Gilgamesh story and they made depictions of it because they thought it was a true story. Shamash, who was the commander of the landing platform, is pictured here in a stela. Now, this is an interesting stela, which is a stone that somebody carved onto, telling a story. That here is Shamash, and he's a giant compared to the people. So we have the fact that there was a discrepancy in height between the Anunnaki and the people. And this is a depiction of Shamash. He was, in the Greeks, he was called Apollo. He had many names, but he was the golden sun god. And they depicted him flying around with wings. And Gilgamesh, in his encounter with Shamash, wanted immortality, and of course, he didn't get it from him because he wasn't allowed to. In the 11th tablet, the Epic of Gilgamesh appears to us from antiquity. And this tablet is the most famous tablet. It's the 11th tablet. And it tells this story that I've alluded to of what the Great Flood was according to the Sumerian cuneiform text. And when they found this and they started to translate it, they recognized the story was very similar to the Bible, but they knew this thing was 2,000 years older than the Bible. And they said, what could possibly be this story? Where'd it come from? Who wrote it? Why was it being told in this fashion? And how did it appear in the Bible? So, what I'm saying to you is that when you get your books, this is the book that you're going to get, Gilgamesh 10. You will see and read what could be a true story. Now, bear in mind, the facts that we point out, there's pictures in the book. There's pictures of the objects that I've described to you here, which were real things on the planet. You go up and touch them, and you can look at them and try to decide what they meant. But they appear in this story as facts. So my question is, if these things really existed, was the story really true? Or was it just a way for them to transfer information to us over a long period of time? And I think it's a significant story because if you look at what's going on in this tale, you come to the realization that this could be the true story of Noah. And if it is the true story of Noah, it validates the fact that there were the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were here, and that they coexisted side by side with the people of Uruk, and that there was a Princess Ishtar, because we have a statue of her, and there was a landing platform where the rockets took off, because we know it's there. And all these pieces put together, I think, are going to make a fascinating movie. If we ever get this movie made, which I'm hoping we will, folks like yourself, who are just on the maybe outside looking in on the history of the Anunnaki, are going to start asking questions. Where did we come from? Is it true? And I think that we need to get this information to as many people as possible. I really feel that it's important that you and I understand that we're all brothers under the skin. We all come from the same DNA. And this story could bring us forward and maybe overcome some of this nonsense about my God's better than your God. Now, bear in mind, the Anunnaki had a God. They weren't godless. They had their God they called the creator of all. And the question that they couldn't answer is, where did the universe come from and where did they come from? We don't know who created the Anunnaki, but we know that they had a deity called the creator of all. And in the cuneiform tablets, at the end of this story of the landing of Noah's Ark, their deity spoke to them somehow and said, your destiny was to come to planet Earth to create humans. And the humans' destiny was to inherit the planet and take care of it. Therefore, you must help them. You must save them. That's how we got saved the second time, because their deity talked about destiny. And the one thing that the Anunnaki absolutely obeyed was destiny. They believed that if it was destined, you couldn't change it, and they had to follow it. Those were their rules. So I've given you some background. You'll all receive your copies soon when I get home and can send them to you. And please, you can print the book if you want to. If you have a printer, e-books are printable. The value on our webpage is $19.95 for the e-book. So you got good value here today. And I'll open us up now for discussion and questions about what we've talked about here.
I wish I had been here for the early part of it.
Okay. What is it that you'd like to know that perhaps I could fill you in quickly on? It's the first written story on the planet. You know that? Gilgamesh, yes.
Yeah.
It was written on 12 cuneiform tablets. And the translation, we've taken the translation and put it into a screenplay format, a book format as a screenplay. And you can actually relive what it was like, because we take you back 4,600 years to the time when the Anunnaki and the humans were living side by side in Uruk, this town, the city, first big city. And what I'm trying to get across is that I think there's a lot for us to learn from this story. About there was a time in history when we coexisted, humans coexisted with the Anunnaki before they phased off the planet. That there were problems that were typical problems. We had a headstrong king who was causing havoc in his community, and they had to get him out of there because they wanted to keep him as king. They didn't want to make a mistake. So they concocted this duplicate of him called Enkidu, who was just as strong and big and looked like him. And the story is fascinating, how these two characters go off into the woods by themselves on an adventure. They have one adventure after another. It's kind of like the first action hero story. It's filled with excitement, challenges, but every once in a while they intersperse something that's real. While they're in the forest, they see the rockets taking off. Well, who pre-biblical talked about rockets? They didn't know about rockets. They didn't know about launching. They didn't know about going up to heaven and having yourself made immortal. So, yes, sir.
Could you spell Noah's real name? The one who was called Noah, could you spell his real name?
Well, he's called several things. In the Babylonian translation, Zizidaru, Z-I-Z, it'll be in your book. When you get your e-book, the character's in there. He's one of the main characters.
Okay.
And it's a flashback. In other words, when Gilgamesh gets to this guy, he says, you're immortal. You live in 900 years. I want some help from you. And so in a flashback, he tells the story of the Great Flood. His life, Noah's life is told. It's a story. That's what is the climax of the movie, will be the Great Flood scene, and how humanity was saved, and why they were saved, and how they survived after they were saved. And all those characters are in the book. You'll see the spelling, correct spelling, and they came from the translation that we used. Like I said, this story goes back from the Akkadian, the Babylonian, to the Sumerian. And when Zecharia translated it, he was meticulous. He took us back to the beginning, to the Sumerian translation, and did the best of that part of it. So I think it's fascinating. Jim?
What's the best translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh other than Sitchin? I bought 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not happy with the ones I bought.
Could you also repeat the question so that we could hear it?
The question was, what was the best translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh? And I take Zechariah's translation. That was in his book. He tells his story of the translation.
There's several other books that are...
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, there's a library of scholars who have studied the Epic of Gilgamesh and have their interpretations of it. There's all kinds of spin. Thank you, Jim. The spin is a great word. In fact, the Anunnaki may be spinning us too. No, it's their version of what happened, maybe a spin story they wanted to tell us. We don't know that. Every time I'd ask Zechariah, I'd say, Do you think the story of the mutiny was spin? They really wanted to create a slave species, and they used that as a phony front to allow them to do what they wanted. And he says, Marshall, the record speaks for itself. He wouldn't deviate from what he had written and what he told. And then I said, they're here for hundreds of thousands of years collecting our gold to save their atmosphere. They didn't need all that gold to save their atmosphere. What did they do with it? Did they use monatomic gold, white powder gold? Zecharia says, the record speaks for it. He didn't want to get into that. I'm thinking outside the box all the time. That's the way my brain works. So I think there are people that I know, I have good friends, Neil Freya, who ingest powdered gold, white powder gold. They think it has curative powers to your body. And these guys obviously did live for much longer than we could imagine. Maybe they were using the gold, because what happened when they got to our planet was a different gravity system, a different temperature system, and they started to age more rapidly than they did back home on Nibiru. So maybe to slow down their aging process, they invented this white powder, atomic gold, and used it for that. Who knows? We have no records of that. This is all speculation.
Is it known now how the gold was processed?
Yeah. There are people selling it. There are people who have discovered the process to convert gold into white powdered monatomic. It's called monatomic gold. And I should think about taking it myself at my age, but I haven't.
As to the rocketry,
Yes.
in the studying that I've done, I've come to think of our rockets as rather primitive. And so I'm wondering how that relates to these people actually using them to cover significant distances.
Okay, the question is, are rockets today, this gentleman thinks they're rather primitive. He wonders what the Anunnaki rocket propulsion system was and how it could travel such great distances, because there were enormous distances that were covered from their planet. Now, their planet is in our solar system, but it's in an elliptical orbit, and it goes out and doesn't come back for 3,600 years. So every 3,600 years, it comes to the inner planets, and then it goes back out. And in order to get from their planet to our planet, they had to travel enormous distance, requiring great propulsion systems. And the only thing we know, as a hint, to answer your question, is that they used Mars as a way station. There was a time in their history when Mars had an atmosphere and had water. And they said they refueled on Mars. So maybe they were using water as part of their propulsion system. Zecharia said it was like a garden hose that spun around, shot the water out and propelled. I said, okay, I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to go there because I really don't know. And I'm an engineer, and I think about these things. But obviously, if they had the technology to come from their planet 400,000 years ago to our planet and to colonize Earth, which we have the records. The record is here that they did colonize our planet. They did mine our gold. And about 200,000 years ago, they made us in their image. That came into the Bible. There was an experiment where they took the species that was here, which was a creature. The creature was called Homo erectus. Creature had evolved on our planet for 1,800,000 years. The most advanced they got in tool making were spears and stones. All of a sudden, 200,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapien, appears. And in less than 200,000 years, which in evolutionary time is nothing, it's a pin drop, we're walking on the moon in 1969. That does not happen in evolution. So you got to ask yourself, how could a species as new as us, Homo sapien, we're actually Homo sapiens sapiens, we can get into that too if you want to know, evolve with such rapid technical advancements? It doesn't happen in evolution. It just is a mystery. And the mystery needs to be examined by all of us to understand what our heritage is, where we came from, what are we made of. Are we all brothers under the skin? We all share the same DNA, because I believe we do. And I believe that if you avail yourself of the information, I I have 4 books that cover from Adam the Missing Link to Gilgamesh 10. The Anunnaki were here. And the 4th book, which I just released this spring, called Mysteries of Alien Technology, will give you an insight into the information that records the history of what they did. It's here. They're physical facts that you can see and feel that will prove to you that there was an advanced civilization here doing things that the Romans took credit for, the Greeks took credit for, the Egyptians took credit for, but they were not capable of general contracting and architectural designs like that were produced in those societies. It's just impossible. I explained. My books have lots of pictures. What I told Zecharia, it's a kind of interesting story. When we got to be friends, I said, I want to produce a book, 8.5 by 11, kind of like Life magazine, a lot of pictures in it, so that people can understand your story. Your books are well written, they're very scientifically researched, but they're hard to read. If anybody's ever picked up one of Sitchin's books, it's a challenge. I read them 3 or 4 times and I still get stuff out of it because I didn't get it the first time. So he said, fine, Marshall, go ahead. So the first book was Adam the Missing Link, and it was filled with pictures, 90 pictures of the artifacts, 14 different artifacts on this planet that couldn't have been built by anything but an advanced technology. Just had to prove it. And I said, at the end of the book, make up your own mind. Do you think the people who said they did it did it? Interesting story about the pyramids. They've now time dated the Sphinx through water erosion to be about 10,500 years old. And we know the Sphinx was built the same time as the pyramids. There's a record of that. So if the pyramids are 10,500 years old, along with the Sphinx, there were no Egyptians 10,500 years ago. I mean, it's impossible. So, their civilization is 300 years after the Sumerians. The Sumerians were first, and the Egyptians 300 years later. But still, that's only 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Who built something like the pyramids 10,500 years ago? Yes, sir.
Wasn't in Zecharia Sitchin's book, The Lost Book of Enki?
Yes.
You mentioned that one of Enki's sons, Negasita, I think, was the builder.
I can't hear you, sir.
Negasita was the builder of the pyramids.
Yes, that was Enki's Enki's son after Marduk. Marduk was first, and Ningasinga was the architect. He became Thoth in Egypt. 1,500 years of rule in Egypt. He created the Egyptian civilization and the beauty of it. And then his brother Marduk kicked him out, and he went to the New World and became Quetzalcoatl.
That's back in America.
Yeah, and Quetzalcoatl became the feathered serpent, the blonde, blue-eyed, light-faced, long-bearded god of the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, all of the North American, South American civilizations. We give credit to Quetzalcoatl, who was the same brilliant guy. Now, there's a story going around. I don't believe I have any evidence to share with you of people who channel. There are a lot of people who do channeling, and they claim to have information from the other world. I have no evidence of that. But I was interested to know that some of them are now saying that there's been a change in the leadership on Nibiru, that Anu is no longer the king, and that Ningasada was chosen to be the next king. Yeah, Ningasada. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Don't take it from me. I'm just repeating. Well, Marduk he was a bad seed. Marduk, they kept him on Earth. They wouldn't even let him come back to the meeting. There was a grand meeting to decide who was going to be, and they wouldn't even let him in. He's a bad character. I mean, he was ambitious for his father, who should have been the next leader, because Enki was the firstborn. But he wasn't born from Anu's wife. He was born from a concubine or princess. And because the bloodline in their civilization, you had to be pure blood. Anu's wife was his sister, so they were really pure blood. And Enlil was the firstborn from the mother and the father, whereas Enki was truly the firstborn, but he wasn't from the mother. So we set up a real conflict for power. Got the firstborn and the trueborn. And I'll tell you, it's a fascinating history. If you get into it, you'll really enjoy yourselves.
This is the first time that I've heard that the story of Quetzalcoatl, and I'm wondering what the evidence is for that.
You have to go back and research. The question is, what is the evidence for the story of Quetzalcoatl? His name was Kukulkan. He had many names, depending on which civilization you're dealing with, but it was the same guy. Excuse me. In the Sumerian civilization, the Anunnaki gave all the firsts to the Sumerians, including the wheel. In the Mesoamerican, Central American, North American civilizations, they never gave the wheel. There's no evidence at all of a wheel being part of those civilizations. It's kind of interesting. I was asked many times, why would that be true? It's easier to control people if they don't have the wheel. See, you got a small, powerful group trying to control a large mass of humanity. And you can do it through kingship, which they brought down. You can do it through religion, which they brought down. A great controlling mechanism. But if they have the wheel, they advance much more rapidly and they become more difficult, as it turned out in Mesopotamia. They had wars coming out their ears, It's a really, I strongly suggest that if you're interested, after you've got your copy of Gilgamesh 10, and you read it, and you relate to what we talked about here, explore further. Open your minds. Go discover more of the history of where we came from, because I think it's very important. Yes, sir?
Did Steven Spielberg give you an answer?
I talked to his agent, and he contemplated it over the weekend and said, no, they're not ready. This was 10 years ago.
Because he lets a lot of truth out in his movies.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think a true story, or a story that has some truth to it, will sell in the theater much quicker.
Yeah.
Look at Titanic. Everybody knows the damn ship sunk, but they made a story about it, true story, and it was great. So I think this is, if we can get it, we have some people interested in it now, and if they pull it off, I will feel happy that we made some small contribution to the expanding knowledge that we all need to get. Because, folks, we're at the tipping point in our civilization right now. We have the ability to obliterate ourselves totally. And I'm hopeful that because we were saved once by Enki, if Enki comes back, which he could, I don't think he ever got back to Nibiru. I think he's on the mothership hanging out maybe around Mercury someplace. And it's not that far to get back here from Mercury. So that we've had incidences where flying saucers have flown over our silos with our atomic weapons and deactivated them. So if they have that technology, and we get to the point where we're about to do ourselves in, hopefully he'll come back and save us again from ourselves. We're supposed to we inherited this planet. We're supposed to take care of this planet. We're doing a very bad job. Very bad. Yes, sir?
One other question. I don't know if this pertains right now, but I have read so many different descriptions of exactly when Nibiru is supposed to be back around again. What is your best guess?
Good question. The question is, when will Nibiru return? I had this discussion with Zecharia. We both did our math separately, taking different starting points. We both came within 100 years. He said 1,600 years. I said 1,500 years. But from now, yeah. You don't need Nibiru to come back for the Anunnaki to come back. What I'm saying is,
If it does, that could affect a lot of
well, it could, yeah, but we're not going to be here. Let's forget it. I think that when they phased off, they were told by Galzu that because you've been here so long, that your body has acclimated to our gravity system and to our heat system and to our food chain system, that if you go back to Nibiru, you're going to die. So I don't think they went. They stayed on the mothership. The mothership is self-contained. It's enormous. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Didn't he also in his writings mention that I think 600 were left here on Earth to watch over us, another 300 in the heavens?
Okay, the question is, are there 600?
Yeah, 600 on Earth and 300 in the heavens.
Yeah.
In Tapua.
I have no information on that, sir. I'm sorry. I mean, there are a lot of people who are taking the information and spinning it themselves. I try in my books to be honest with you, to give you, excuse me, the facts as I know them, show you the pictures, tell you what I think, and I want you to make up your own minds whether you believe it or not, or what you want to do with it. I'm not preaching here. I'm not trying to tell you what's going on, what's going to happen, what could happen. I'm merely telling you to educate yourself. Get informed. It's important for us to have enough people around who have thought about where we came from, have thought about these bits of information that have come from down to us through the cuneiform tablets, and are willing to have open minds about where we're going and how we can solve our problems. We need to solve a lot of problems. The worst thing going on in this planet Earth in our civilization is that we're killing each other in the name of my God's better than your God. Basically, that's it. You go back in history, and all the wars were religious wars, and they were perpetrated by those who said, my God's the right God, your God's wrong. You either die or join me. That's still going on. We've got groups now in the Middle East who are taking Christians and Jews and everybody that's non-Islamic and doing this to them because they say their God's the only right God. We've got to undo that. And the only way to undo it is to understand how it got started, where it came from, and how we can undo it. You know, Eisenhower supposedly said, what was it, Reagan? Reagan, right? He said that if we ever wanted to solve our problems, all we have to do is all of us look to the future of alien invasion, and we'll forget about our problems and deal with that problem. I don't know if that's...
That was Reagan.
Was it Reagan? Thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
In the flood event, all the gods left to go away because they knew it was
Yes.
coming. And wasn't it that the predominant opinion was let them die, and it was only one or two Enki, or?
No. The question is, when the gods left, was it let them feed for themselves and die? Before the Great Flood, which was maybe 11,000 years ago, Enki was the commander, and he was fed up with us. He thought he was the guy that said, they're too noisy, they're diluting our bloodline, the flood will wipe them out, let it happen. Let them all die. But their creator of all spoke to Enki and said, it's your destiny to preserve the life of humans, and here's how you do it without breaking your oath. I'm not going to get into the story because it's kind of an interesting story. This is what the Noah story was according to the cuneiform tablets. There was an oath taken. You're not going to help anybody because the commander, Enlil, said, let them all die. He was the angry God. It didn't happen. And then it had to turn around at the end when there were survivors. There's a great scene in the book when they come down from the mothership and they find Noah and his people and these animals. They say, what happened? What? Who? And I won't spoil this story for you. Anything else?
So I just want to clarify one thing. Was Enki the one that wanted to save mankind, and Enlil was one that wanted
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The question was Enki the one that saved humanity, and Enlil was the one that wanted him to die, and that's true in the story. Now, where did the story come from? Who wrote it? We don't know. But I tend to believe that they wanted us to know this information. They wouldn't have spelled it out the way they did in a story form. That's what's so great about Gilgamesh. It's the first story, and it has all this information in it. And what I know from history is that when an advanced civilization meets a primitive one, they transfer technology automatically. And that's what happened to us. We are products of an advanced civilization that transferred enough information to us to get us to survive and hopefully be better. But we haven't turned out that way. We're killing each other, which is stupid. What other species do you know that kills its own? None. Except lions that eat their cubs, and that's a hereditary thing. Okay, if there aren't more questions, we'll wind it up. And I want to thank you so much for joining us for this workshop. And